Welcome back to Junction 119. This is Casen.
This is Kellen, fresh from work with my collar too. Looks like you are too.
This is a hoodie, but
Is
got
it
work
really?
from
Oh, it
it's a
is a hoodie. I can see.
short sleeve hoodie. Yeah. Um, I work from home today, so
Very
casual.
nice.
But yeah, so we're back again 2 weeks in a row for the
For
first time of it.
2025.
Uh, we had a lineup and we had to make a little adjustment to it here today because Kellen, you've got a new quarterback in town.
Yeah, God. All right. Yeah, let me first preface this by saying that today's show is going to be really us playing catch up about another show, so to speak, one that we haven't talked about on this cast before. And we have referenced it before. We're going to dive into Andor, and we have a couple of sports stories. But yes, as Kason alluded to so illustriously, we begin with the very fresh news because we're recording this on a Thursday early evening that Aaron Rodgers is set to join the Steelers, I guess, as the mandatory minicamp approaches, is how I've kind of read the headline today when it was presented to me via Rappaport and all these other people. Um, now that it's actually happened, I have thoughts. I, I I I don't know, Kason. Do you want to hear the screaming lunatic Steelers fan in me first, or do you want to hear the sensible, rational, trying to make sense of it Steelers fan in me first?
Let's start with lunatic and
Okay,
we'll kind of calm down from there.
that's fair. Okay, so as much as I can say on our G to PG podcast, I I am under this belief that there must be some sort of inner office vendetta, or not vendetta, agenda of Art Rooney II to come any means possible maintain the organization as it was when his dad was in charge. As I've said before, the Steelers were only ever good in their history mainly because of Dan Rooney. No disrespect to the chief, Art Rooney Sr., but in reality, Dan was the one who drafted the 70s players. He was the one who kind of oversaw the regime that brought the Steelers back to Super Bowl prowess early in my life. And I just feel like he's very hands off. I feel like he's letting all of the regime people just do what their job is. He's going to let Tomlin do whatever he wants, and that's fine. I think the Steelers are a 8 to 9 win team with or without Aaron Rodgers. I guess on paper, some can make the argument that he would be better with that they're going to be better with or without. Bottom line, I don't think this changes the Steelers one bit, other than it's going to make their locker room totally toxic. You take someone who has burned every piece of goodwill he probably has in the league left, in terms of just anyone taking him like seriously as both a professional and to some degree a human being in Aaron Rodgers, adding him to that locker room. All I can say is that Mike Tomlin's regime has a reputation of being able to keep even the most boneheaded and crazy, if we will, individuals on the roster, or the potential for lunacy guys on the roster, a lid on it. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is the quietest Aaron Rodgers has ever been on a roster to some degree. But the raving lunatic Steeler fan in me says, "Why are we doing this?" I think I sent no less than 10 garbage can emojis to many people today of how I feel about this whole move. This is not a team that is almost even worth taking seriously. I had a friend send to me today. It's amazing watching the team that I've rooted for the hardest and rooted for the longest and the easiest to root for in my life immediately turn into the hardest team in the NFL to root for. And that was said to me today, and I cannot agree more. I actively dislike every decision this organization has made for probably the last 4 years or so in terms of roster creation. And I really find it amazing that they are somehow gung ho stuck to this idea that they are simply a couple of clicks away from like the Chiefs and or the Eagles in terms of making it to another Super Bowl. That is me. That is my as subdued raving lunatic Steeler fan take I can right now. I'll let you respond to anything I said. It's terrible. I don't like it.
I mean, I will just lead off by saying I I resent every single Steeler fan complaining about the Steelers as a Browns fan. It's just like,
That's
shut
fair.
up. Like, shut up. Like, you have no room to talk.
Totally
I mean,
valid.
I get it. Like, your team is going down the drain, and that's painful to watch. But at the same time, shut up. You're gonna make the playoffs. I mean, you're gonna get bounced by the Bengals or Ravens, but you're gonna win 9, 10 games. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's just gonna be peak comedy to see the Steelers at like 3-3, and then Aaron Rodgers Tuesday on Pat McAfee. Like
Yeah.
it's just like and he's talking about, and then slowly the Steelers go 3-4, 3-5.
And then they'll rattle off like 5 straight wins in December and ultimately
Yeah,
make the
yeah,
playoffs before getting bulldozed by someone.
yeah.
Um, Everything you said, totally valid. Everything you just said, totally understand. And quite frankly, me pulling it back from being the raving lunatic Steeler yinzer of myself and thinking about this logically, I'm like, okay, does Aaron Rodgers, in theory, give you a better chance to win than not having him on the team? Honest to God, no. I can't sit here and think that changes the trajectory of wins either way. Um, I'm not even gonna lie; they're gonna be a hard team for me to really want to watch come this fall. And at a time when I sat here and just kind of have said, right now it just feels like every Pittsburgh team is a joke right now, and like this, it feels like the last vestige of the three teams in town clinging on to anything they had relevant left. Just said, all right, let's just go full megalomaniacs here.
I do sympathize with that because what Pitt like what you said, all of the Pittsburgh teams kind of have the same thing of there is absolutely zero direction for any of the franchises, despite some talent being on the rosters. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, like the Pirates have Paul Skeens, the Steelers have TJ. I mean, it's just it's just kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, there's no plan, direction, intent of
the
where to take
Penguins
these
are
franchises.
the Penguins are an aging dynasty that
Yeah,
somehow
yeah.
think that somehow the Fenway Group thinks that a new coach is what they need to be contenders again. I don't know. What they need is to accept that they're past their prime. But yeah, there's no direction. There's no real plan. I the interviews of the front office and the Steelers brass have never been more of a joke to me. I have zero interest in hearing any of them speak about this other than Mike Tomlin try to go on another long tangent about how he's loved Aaron Rodgers for 10 years. I'm like, yeah, well, Aaron Rodgers 10 years ago was good, Mike. Um, it's just another fix it bandage situation at quarterback. Like I said, the only thing I can hope for as a Steeler fan nowadays is just a full on tank. I want some way somehow, despite their best efforts, the Steelers to lose as many games as possible because that's the only semblance of what's ever going to get us a decent quarterback again and put this offense in a place that even Mike Tomlin can't screw it up. That's the only thing I can hope for. So if you're asking me, Kellen, you're rooting against your own team. I mean, to some degree, yeah, because I don't see this going a positive direction. So
I yeah, I would agree that I think definitely for a team like the Steelers, they need complete reboot and culture change
yeah,
because it's similar to the Penguins in the fact of it's like the people who were successful 10 years ago are still there and think it's still 10 years ago, and it's like
yeah, but the Penguins
no.
even moved on from Mike Sullivan. The Penguins even have a change of ownership, and the ownership is
I
making changes. So
I also do wonder if that how much of that was him maybe wanting out too, because like I
yeah,
don't know if he wanted to stick around.
yeah, and
Like if I
Sully
was a
went to
coach,
the Rangers.
yeah,
Listen,
if I was a
this
coach like him, I wouldn't want to sit through that. But
this is about the Steelers, and I will say that if you're a Steeler fan that's happy about this, I mean, power to you. Good, awesome, good for you, sweet. I know plenty of them listen to me on this show. If you know me, you should know that this was going to be my reaction to this. At least he continues the long-standing tradition of my life as a Steeler fan of not liking not liking the starting quarterback as a person. So that's without getting too into it. That's how I'm feeling right now. I'm not excited. I'm not. I have multiple chats of people I know from Pittsburgh. None of them are happy about this. So it's kind of like, and I read a few quotes to you by memory just a bit ago. So
Well, it's also a thing of like
yeah,
the Mike Tomlin like that I would expect would have been, "Hey Aaron, you want to come play for the Steelers 3 months ago?" And if he goes, "Nah, I'm gonna wait until the last possible time when I have to be in there for mandatory minicamp,"
right.
then okay, never mind. You're not a Steeler. Like if you aren't going to be here in April studying this new playbook, then you're not for this team. Like the fact that the Steelers played this game and let him wait until June is mind-boggling to me.
Whatever happened to the Mike Tomlin who said multiple times, "We want volunteers, not hostages"? Like, what happened to that guy? He's not here. Is it because, and what I can see is an organization similar to the Jets when we talked about it on this show 2 years ago that's going to bend over backwards to let Aaron Rodgers do whatever he wants to do. And then when he's not there on a Sunday simply because he's got something going on in another part of the world for whatever reason when he's supposed to be there playing football, I'm just sitting there thinking, all right, thank you, Steelers, for officially becoming like the Jets to some degree. Um, that's how this is going to go. I mean, that's really how I believe this is going to go. He's a patch fix it quarterback. I just hope it doesn't completely. No, I kind of hope it does completely crash and burn. Like I said, I hope it crashes and burn, and the Steelers have very few wins, so that there's some semblance of being in a situation where you can draft a quarterback next year.
Now, I will say the thing that the Steelers do have going for them is aside from Aaron, like their quarterback room is more serviceable than the Jets was with Aaron.
Sure.
I mean, I just saying, like if they have to go to Mason or Will Howard, whatever, like it's not going to be quite as much of a disaster as it was with the Jets.
I do wonder what's going through Mason Rudolph's head in the sense of, he was never embraced by Ben when he was there, and now he's definitely not going to be embraced by Aaron Rodgers now that he's
I
there.
don't know. I mean, they
It's
certainly probably share a lot of opinions about certain things,
that's probably
so they might actually get along real well.
that's actually probably pretty true, Casen. You make a good point about that. So, and then you got Will Howard, who's just kind of there. So, reigning national champion Will Howard, who I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, if anything happens, I wouldn't mind seeing what he can do at quarterback. I don't think it's going to be
Yeah,
much, but
I mean, look. As an Ohio State fan who has fallen in love with Will, I can say that he is going to be fighting for I
I
mean a
think
late
so.
round draft pick, like his spot's not guaranteed, and so he will be putting in the work to earn that spot.
I agree.
So I mean. If anything else, I mean, break glass in case of emergency and just see what he has. Because he
I
could he
like that.
could he could end up being good.
You're right. So that's my take. The Steelers quarterback situation goes from circus to well, no, goes from circus might be coming to town to circus is now coming to town. So with that, we move on to a circus that just left town. The circus, as in the party's over in New York. New York Knicks lost, obviously, were eliminated by the Indiana Pacers. The NBA Finals will have started by the time this show comes out. We're not talking about it because it'll happen on Thursday night and you'll hear this on Friday. We're here to talk about how Tom Thibodeau has been relieved of his duties as New York Knicks head coach, which is noteworthy considering that Jalen Brunson, in the post-game interview when they were eliminated by the Indiana Pacers, was asked straight up, so do you think, is there a sense that Tibs is the guy to be running this team in the future? And of course, Jalen Brunson gave the stereotypical, like, are you really asking me that right now? Kind of response, which is the response he should have had. But that reporter now also looks like a genius because within 24 hours of that question being asked, or like, no, within 48 hours of that question being asked, Tibbs was fired. Um, what were your thoughts on it, Casen? That is what happened. What's your thoughts?
So yeah, I mean, Tibbs has a reputation. I mean, he's been fired from a lot of places.
Yeah.
He's kind of on like a mid-tier level of coaches of, not terrible. Like he's good enough to always get jobs, but he always gets fired.
Yeah.
So let me look up his actual record real quick here. So he was let me see here. So he's just over 500, which is about exactly what you'd expect. He's like uh 579, which is
Mm.
like that's the tough thing with coaches like that is it's like good enough to get the job, not quite good enough to keep it. But I will say, he's been much better in New York than he was in Minnesota, for
Yeah, I agree.
example. I mean, I even he's probably been like around as good as he was in Chicago, just minus Derrick Rose. But like, because I mean, he finished third in the Atlantic 3 years ago, second in the Atlantic last year, and second in the Atlantic this year. I mean, it's not like they're bad.
No.
So to me, this firing, which was kind of a shock because they just made the conference finals,
Right.
means that they made the decision to fire him in April, and then they just kept playing, and they made this surprise run that they figured they would have lost, and it was kind of like, well, we kind of still have to fire him anyway,
Yeah.
which I don't know.
He's not the long-term solution at head coach. And yes, they definitely knew that when the season ended. It's interesting because, he spent what, 6 years, 5 years in Chicago as the head guy, 5 years or 4 years at Minnesota, and now 5 years at New York. The arc's very similar, right? And he ultimately was kind of let go at each place because of very similar things. He has the reputation, which I remember as a Bulls fan in high
Yeah,
school, of not trusting his bench. That's been said about him, but it's true. He tends to run his starters into the ground, to where they don't have much left in the tank by the by the playoffs. And quite frankly, like a lot of people still kind of blame that mismanagement on Derrick Rose. They blame Derrick Rose's initial injury on that, on just his philosophy. Then I don't think you can blame an actual injury on him. I'm not saying anything like that, but I am saying there is a trend with when you overplay your starters and the load management is not something you take into account, and you have bench guys. I remember people complaining along the lines of, the Chicago Bulls of those days really do have a really good bench. You got Kirk Heinrich and you got Nate Robinson on the bench, and yet for whatever reason, Tibbs doesn't want to play them. I mean, it's not like it was terrible, but you need to trust your bench. So I'm not. It sucks to see that happen to Tibbs again. I'm sure he'll land on his feet. He's got enough of a pedigree as an NBA head coach that if not right away, I think he'll definitely at least get an assistant gig right away if he wants one. Um, that being said, yeah, I shudder to wonder what the Knicks do to get over that hump if they're gung ho about winning a championship. I've already heard Hurley's name being tossed around, Dan Hurley.
Mhm.
I've already heard that he's going to get it. He's going to be tossed around every
I
NBA
mean,
offseason. Like,
the immediate thing was Jay Wright or Dan Hurley,
yeah,
which honestly, I mean, if I'm Jay Wright, I mean, there's a lot of Nova guys on the Knicks. I really consider that. If I'm Dan Hurley, looks like the Yukon ship sailed last year, so it might be time to get out of town.
might
I
maybe.
wouldn't be blaming him for that one. But yeah, I mean, I do want to at least have a bit of a larger conversation about it because we've talked a lot about coaching firings recently, and there's a lot of real twitchy fingers in front offices, in hockey and basketball,
Yeah.
and even the NFL to some extent. But it's just kind of like, to me, you have to really think about the decision. If, like, say you make up your mind in March that you're going to fire a coach at the end of the season, and then all of a sudden they get hot in April and they make it all the way to the conference finals, and they end up being like 2 games away from going to the finals. Does that mean nothing?
Mm,
Like if you were bad and snuck into the playoffs as like an 8 seed, maybe, and like everybody knew you didn't belong there, but like you were not, you were like a middle of the road playoff team. You competitively played the Celtics. got a little lucky, but at the same time, you have to think about who you are. Like,
Yeah,
you are the Knicks who have been irrelevant for 25 years. You finally actually found a coach who has the personality that people rally around. Like the Tibs Knicks, as far as I can tell, New Yorkers love the Knicks right now. Like they love the grit and the personality of the team. And so to me, I would think long and hard about changing my mind if all of a sudden it worked and you were a couple games away from going to the finals. Like
I agree. I think that
like to me that I would have a conversation with with Jalen Brunson and Cat and say, hey, are you guys happy with Tibbs? I maybe they were consulted. I don't know,
I was going to say,
but
unless those conversations you just talked about have already happened, I think that there's a possibility that down the stretch, people might have like internally been like, you know what, he's not the guy, and then they just played out of their minds. Let's also just kind of talk about this. I do think it's not it's not lost on me. Let me just kind of, just give me a second here. It's not lost on me because this was pointed out to me. Can you kind of look at this Knicks run as a little bit of a farce? I think you can to some degree. You struggle in 6 games to beat a relatively not as good as you Pistons team. You take out a Celtics team in 6 games with Jason Tatum going down with a horrendous injury and blow them out in game 6. And then you run straight into a Pacers team and basically get your clock cleaned. I'm not sitting here thinking that he is like the end all be all or he had a whole lot to do with where the Knicks found themselves, which was still losing to the Pacers in 6 games. So I agree with what you're saying, but I don't put as much stock on that when all the other stuff still is
no,
attached to
no,
him. You know what I mean?
I'm there with you. I'm there with you. I mean, I don't know if this is the
Yeah.
best example,
Yeah.
but I've noticed it before to where, you still fire a coach despite, some postseason success. And
Yeah.
so it's just, I'm saying, like, I don't know if I like the trend of like ignoring postseason success.
I got you.
Like, like I get what you're saying and the fact that that probably was kind of a fluke, but I
But
don't
it
think the
wasn't
Knicks.
nothing. I mean, I get what you
Yeah,
mean.
it wasn't
Yeah.
nothing, and it's not like the Knicks have been terrible. Like, and like I said, like, who are you gonna get that's better? Like to me, I only make that decision if I have Dan Hurley's contract signed.
Dan
Like,
Hurley. Yeah.
like that. That's just what I'm saying. Of like, I don't fire Tibbs unless I know who I'm getting and they know they're coming.
And
Like,
maybe they do. I mean, who knows? Probably not. But, there's a chance that it could be the case.
because how many
Yeah.
times have we seen organizations fire moderately successful guys just to completely fall off a cliff because they hire an idiot?
Well, and
Like,
maybe that'll happen, and the Knicks will go back to what they really are.
yeah,
A mediocre to not good basketball team that disappoints in the biggest market in the country. So
exactly.
we'll see. We'll see. That's what I've got on Tibbs. Do you want to briefly touch on the beginning of the Stanley Cup final that happened
Yeah. I
before
mean,
diving into Andor?
incredible game.
Legit, yeah, amazing.
Like we figured it would be.
Yeah,
Uh, rematch. Overtime game one. Incredible.
Leon, you got back and forth, back and forth. Leon Draisaitl, Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand score in the first period. You've got Panthers leading. They both score in the second. Sam Bennett again. Victor Averdson, I believe is how you say his name. The Oilers tie the game in the third period, and then Leon Draisaitl with 30 seconds left in the first overtime period sends game one to Edmonton. I think it's going to be an incredible series. I really do. I really think it's going to be the series that's incredible, like the NBA Finals is not going to be.
Oh yeah. The NBA Finals are not going to be good, but I digress on that. I will say, I mean, I've said it on the show before.
Mm.
I mean, my hot take is I love Connor, but he's the second best player on his team. I mean, no offense to Connor, like he's got incredible and generational skills, like playmaking, but I mean, when it comes to like scorer, Draisaitl's a much better scorer.
Yeah, and well,
I mean,
he's just as synonymous with this era of the Oilers as McDavid is. But honestly, when Crosby was going down the stretch there, a lot of the goals, the critical goals in like 2008 and 9, I remember all the guys who Crosby set up, and I think
mhm.
maybe McDavid finally doing that is what's going to get them over the hump. Um, because that first game was impressive, very impressive for a cast that has sat here and kind of dogged them over the last couple of years, including this year. So I'm excited, man. I'm really excited. It's going to be another great Stanley Cup final. The first game was like an instant classic. So,
Mhm.
um, great stuff. Is it time for Andor, Casen?
Yeah, let's get into it. So
Let's
I
let's preface this by saying that Kaysen is more of the Star Wars expert than I am when it comes to the history of our show. For the cover sake of the show, we are doing the Star Wars cover. I think Kaysen and I came into this knowing that was going to be the case today.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Andor is a show that came out initially 2 years ago. We are kind of catching up for it with it. The second season has come and gone. Spoiler alert for the entire series at this point, because I probably
Mhm.
will. We both probably will reference things from the first season as well
Yeah.
that lead into this season. Kaysen, you can go.
I'll start.
Yeah,
I'll just say hand up. I mean I was late to the Andor train. I kind of missed it when it originally came out, the first season, and then it was just something that like because there was like kind of a lot of episodes, it just took me a while to like
yeah.
have time and to like get into wanting to watch it. Despite everybody telling me to watch it, but it if anybody tells you to watch Andor, which spoiler, I will tell you all listening right now to watch Andor, I do it. Listen to our advice and do it because spoiler, great. It's great. It's great.
It's a very good show. I have my issues with the story of the second season, but anything I say in criticism, it's not me nitpicking. It's just things with the show that I wasn't the happiest that they took the story that direction, but I understand why they did.
Mhm.
And I mean character choices. It's very minuscule. Doesn't take away from an overall, I think, classic Star Wars show. I think my only biggest gripe in terms of the creation of the show is just that it's almost too bad. And if you're not familiar, this is supposed to follow Cassian Andor in leading into Rogue One, which leads into the first ever Star Wars movie, A New Hope. Rogue One, a film that I think is disgustingly underrated. I love Rogue One. I've thought that since I first saw it. Rogue One to me is popcorn entertainment. I can pop that on. It's up there with my favorite
I
Star Wars movies, and that was
so
before this show.
I mean here's the thing. I This show makes Rogue One better.
Yeah,
It makes it better. And my issue with
and
Rogue
Rogue
One,
One made A New Hope better, in my
yeah,
opinion.
exactly. My
Yeah,
my issue with Rogue One was not so much the movie itself. It was just kind of like I don't know where I should have cared. And so I feel like it would have been much better if Andor came out first,
yeah,
because then you would have been like, oh yeah, like Andor, and then the end of Rogue One.
right. Well, and it almost makes me wish that we would have gotten 3 seasons of this. I think that you could
Yeah.
have. I think the way they told so you see Cassian kind of like go from like kind of roaming scavenger to like oppressed to part of the rebellion in the first season, and then the second season is very much him kind of being part of it. And years go by. The way they tell the story, it's 4 arcs that are told a year apart, 3 episode arcs that is, that are told a year apart from each other, which is a very interesting way to do a season of TV. I've never seen a TV show do anything like that before.
Yeah.
But I
Mhm.
almost wish that we would have gotten another season in the middle of season 1 and 2, and season 2 would have been 3 to really ramp it up
Yeah.
and lead us into it, just to see Cassian do more stuff and to see more people, maybe more uprisings are put down by the Empire. I just feel like there was more story to tell here that they could have done. But I honestly believe that season one of Andor was so out of nowhere good, like completely out of left field. No one expected anything from this show. I think the majority of people were like, they're doing a show about an obscure character from Rogue One. I think everyone was like, we can throw that
Yeah,
away.
they were
Yeah.
like an obscure character from Rogue One that we know dies. Like
Yeah.
what?
And I can tell you, Kason, what's interesting is that show debuted in the fall of 2022,
Was it
I
two?
believe. It was
Yeah.
2022. And at the time, I was like in between jobs, and I kind of on a whim ended up starting watching it with my mom. We watched the first three episodes because it was getting reviewed really well. And my mom's a huge Star Wars fan. I'm not as big a Star Wars fan as even her or yourself. Okay. And we watched it, and I just remember us saying this kind of has no business being this good for our first three episodes, and it only got better. And it got to the point where the two of us were also like, "Hey, everyone, watch Andor." And had we had this show at the time, which ironically enough, Cason, when Andor was first coming out, the seeds for what became this show were being planted then, because I was
Mhm.
thinking about feasibility then before I approached you, of course, and the rest being history. But uh, I would have said on this show then, yeah, like everyone needs to go watch this. And I told people, I presented it to them like this. It is the best Star Wars content Disney has come out with since they've owned the IP. Period. That is how I presented it to people. After
Mhm.
seeing the second season, it's the best Star Wars content that Disney has come out with since owning the IP. I still believe that. And I don't really even think it's close. But at the same time, it's very adult Star Wars. Like, this is not a show for children. This is not a, this is definitely a show that even for like, I think if you're in it for the space wizards aspect of it, if you're in it for all those things, I mean, this is a Star Wars story that unfolds like Game of Thrones, from the politics to the espionage to there's so many things going on. It's really complex storytelling. Some people would probably even get bored with this show. If you're not, if you're not enthralled into that kind of writing and you're not more of a somber character driven moment
Mhm.
story person. There's not a whole lot of action in this show. What action there is very perilous though, because you feel the weight. You also feel like anyone could die at any moment. It really makes the Empire genuinely scary as well. Um, and if anything, if it's hard to go from Andor into Rogue One or A New Hope, Cason, I would think it's a tonal shift because you watch like some episodes of Andor, you would think A New Hope's like a comedy compared to the stakes that they put in place, in this show. Thoughts on any of that stuff? I'm kind of painting the picture before we delve into the
No,
actual
yeah, I
meat
mean
and potatoes of the story.
I think so. So, kind of focusing on season one to just kind of wrap up
Sure.
some threads on the background. Like the there were three episodes that took place inside a prison. That
Yeah,
was like the one set for like three episodes, and that was the best three episodes of the whole season.
it was incredible. It was,
I mean,
yeah,
I mean, you look at some people. So the show was created and run by Tony Gilroy. And Tony Gilroy is one of those guys that from hearing, his interviews and things, you can just give him just say, "Hey, you've got a bag of Doritos and some paper clips, make a movie out of this." And he'll do it. I mean, he's one of those guys that just knows what he wants and he'll figure out how to get it done.
yeah.
And then they just said, "Okay, actually, well, here's a blank check for season two." So,
Well, and he actively was someone who was not a Star Wars fan, and a lot of people said about Andor as both a criticism and a compliment to the show in the first season and second season too. It doesn't feel like traditional Star Wars, but quite frankly, to tell a story this serious, it can't.
yeah.
I mean, the closest thing I can think of is like occupied nations during World War II. That's like we're talking like that level of secrecy, espionage, like oppression in a
And,
way that's that's very timely for the subject material. Go ahead.
right. Well, and I think so. So to back up, Tony Gilroy, if you're unfamiliar, is the guy behind the Bourne movies.
Yeah.
And so that's where this whole kind of thing takes place is it's a spy thriller. And he also did Michael Clayton too. So spy political thriller set in Star Wars without like Jedis and space wizard. Like there's none of that in here. It's essentially just writing a Bourne movie, copy and paste, replace Jason Bourne with Cassian Andor. Like that's it.
Yeah, it is. And so to wrap it up, you know, they kind of show where all the characters are at the end of the show, first season, who's going to continue, I should say, into the second one. Very much establishing that the main crew is kind of on the run. It follows Imperials too, it follows people, but that was probably one of the things I was most impressed with, following characters like Dedra and Cyril.
I
Char-
w One of my favorite characters of the whole
Mhm.
show, Cyril's mom. So
Oh,
funny.
Cyril's mom. Yeah, I think you're not the only one in my circle that would agree with that. Cyril's
I
mom
was
is funny, man. Yeah, go ahead.
I was like, oh God, this poor kid.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's just it's
he's like, I was really important. I had a big job, mom.
yeah, and yeah, and I have thoughts on Cyril's character. I have thoughts on everybody, but the other thing I wanted to say, just Diego Luna as Cassian, he got awards the first time around. I'm sorry. If any show at Emmys this year gets anything over Andor, a farce. This show should win every award it's up for, from set design to acting to storyline to. I mean, this thing is incredible. I can't sing this show like from a technical perspective. I mean, you talk about immersing me into a show. Um, but that's the other thing. I wanted to pull the cast up because um, you can kind of fill in the gaps while I do that. While so that I can do that when we get into season two. There we go.
Yeah. So, I think,
We can start the season two discussion.
yes. So to kind of first on the first section of the season two episodes, the first three episodes plot line.
Mhm.
I thought it was really neat how it kind of started with Cassian trying to steal the plane, because I thought it was really cool to see it. The scene of him in the hangar trying to fly that TIE fighter, and
Yeah,
it's like getting stuck. I was like, this is absolutely insane.
yeah. He clearly, like he said it later in the arc, this was not the ship I was trained to fly.
Yeah, he
Like,
was like, I don't know how to fly.
nah, I'm in trouble here. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that was so funny. Um, Kind of unintentionally, but maybe intentionally. But
It was good. I thought I think something I had to adjust to myself right away is that a lot of the things I wanted to see in this season were going to be later in the season, because I didn't much care for anything with Cassian having to do with the people in the dispute right there. But
yeah,
the first arc had to do a lot with Mon Mothma and her daughter getting married and her
yeah,
trying to break from the old customs. But I also think that Mon Mothma, who they show going from a senator all the way to where she is in when we see her in A New Hope, which was incredible to watch that whole arc happen, and her basically lose everything for justice, right? It it was a synonymous of, I think, in that first arc, she is breaking from the traditions and she's trying to kind of encourage her daughter and other people around her to do it along with her. And I thought it was poignant when she went through her daughter and said, I'm giving you the chance to kind of back out of this. Because she was in an arranged marriage where it didn't even seem like they were friendly with each other, quite frankly. They just kind of coexisted. And her daughter basically shoots it down. And I think that Mon going in and essentially like having several drinks and just dancing during the wedding was her kind of letting go to not of the cause, grasping fully the cause and letting go of any semblance she has of saving a family after that. It just this whole second season just really hammered home sacrifice, and every arc there was someone sacrificing something major, and it just felt like that was the first major one of the season.
yeah, absolutely. I going back, just sort of
Yeah,
casually for a
we're gonna
second.
bounce around.
When I started watching the show, I after you and friend of the show Matt pestering me for like 2 years to watch it, um, I texted Matt and I was like, the least interesting part of the show is Cassian's plot lines.
Yeah.
Like send me back to Coruscant so I can see Luthen and Mon Mothma.
Yeah, man, Stellan Skarsgård, brother.
I was like the least interesting storylines are the ones with Cassian, and it kind of fit for these first 3 episodes because I was like, I don't care that he's kidnapped by these idiots. Like, get me back to this wedding.
Oh, dude. I gotta say, if there's Stellan Skarsgård's Luthen Riel, I honestly is probably by the end of the 2 seasons of Andor that I saw him, he might have crept into my top 5 favorite Star Wars characters ever. Like that, like legit, like that's how. Like to
Yeah.
me, he's ever so him and Saw Gerrera are both up there for me in terms of just we will get the job done. We know what the assignment is, and we don't care where we got to put people to make it happen.
There was the infamous speech he had when he was talking to that ISB
In the first season, yeah.
double agent,
Yep.
yeah, about sacrifice, and it shows because at the wedding, like Luthen takes it upon himself to basically kill Mon's childhood friend
Yeah.
because he knew he was going to be a liability,
Yep.
and Mon knew. Mon eventually figured that out, and she still was friends with him because she knew he was probably right
Yeah.
that she had a blind spot for him, and Luthen had the bigger picture in mind.
And it's interesting because I'm not going to say it yet, but you can tell that in both seasons, like with what Luthen has to do to essentially keep everyone who's part of the cause on the straight and narrow, I would think to myself, everyone would hate this guy. Legitimately, everyone would not be like everyone would not be okay with something Luthen has done or didn't do. You know what I mean? And that's because I'm like, yeah, it's because you all need someone like him to keep the eyes on the prize. Like
Right,
it
right.
ain't gonna be pretty. It's a war. I mean,
His job is not to be friends with everybody. Like his job is to
yeah,
make the hard decisions
yeah.
and the tough calls that nobody else can make.
Yeah, our job is to win. I'm sorry, winning looks like this. You guys are not going to like my methods, but we will win, you know? And I mean, that's just, and they do a really cool thing later. I won't get into that later on, but so moving into kind of that second arc, I have some stuff written down here.
Yeah.
I was really thinking that season 2 was going to go, Casen, in the direction of we're probably like Ferrix in the first season, going to see the suppression of another group of people. They talk about Gorman in the first arc, and they talk about, oh, they're kind of rich, and they're rich because they have these fibers and stuff like that. These spiders make them, which I kind of like how the spiders look like big ants. I liked that.
Mhm.
That was kind of a cool thing. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, they probably need to mine this planet for like something with the Death Star because we know where this is headed. You know what I mean? No one else
Yeah.
does, but it's like, we know where this is headed. And it's interesting in these arcs to see that it was a plan like 3 years in advance when Krennic is like talking to everybody
Yeah.
and you got Dedra
Yeah.
and everything else. One of the other things that they establish in the first arc is that Dedra and Cyril are now a thing. They are involved romantically. That is not a jump that I thought they were going to make from the first season to the second season, but as it was pointed out in the recap, it actually does make sense. They're both
I
motivated by their blind
they
loyalty to the Empire.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they're both like
they
robotic, so it makes sense.
yeah, they make sense. They had a bit of a thing, and like you could tell that like she wasn't not interested. It's just like when she was like, "I'm gonna have you arrested for being like a
Yeah,
stalker." It was more or less like she can't afford a distraction while she's trying to move up the ranks. And then like once he like saved her life on Ferrix, you were like, okay. I mean, like clearly this is
yeah,
gonna go somewhere. But yeah, I thought it was cool how like they as you'll see like they laid out the plan of we need to sow sort of this image of Gorman through the rest of the empire to have a so they'll be okay with whatever we're going to do
but
down the line.
right. So moving ahead, Cyril has now gone to Gorman to get that job, like in kind of keeping eye on the place. He doesn't know why though, and I didn't quite realize that right away. But Dedra kind of got him that job essentially to help her agenda. It was interesting seeing Cyril have a moral compass. I will say I have probably a relatively warm take on Cyril. I mostly, for the most part, hated his character. Not in that like it didn't contribute to the story. Hated him as an individual. I did not like this guy like at all. I got very annoyed with him. I saw him as an antagonist to the rebellion. Skipping ahead a little bit to the actual like rebellion of when the Gore, well, to be fair, the protest, peaceful protest the Gormans were doing, that the Empire then spun into an excuse to go at them like it was the Boston Massacre or something. Um, you know, I think I had this thought of, okay, Cyril sees this as not okay. He's not okay with Dedra. He has just ended things. He's gone into the fray. If Cyril joins the rebellion somehow or does something like anti-Empire, he will go. His whole arc will be one of my favorites in the entire show. And no, he sees Andor and attacks him. And then when that happened, I was like, all right, Cassian, just beat him down. I was gung ho. I
Yeah,
was like, take him all the way down. I've had enough of
I
him. And then he just says, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Yeah, Cassian doesn't even know who you are." Like, it's a Thanos Tawanda moment. Like, what do you think this is? Anyway, that's my rant on Cyril being going out
I
as one of the worst characters. It like, ugh,
the who are you to his head getting blown off is the funniest scene
it
I've
was
ever seen.
it
He's
was
just like,
good.
"Who are you?" And he's like, "What?"
And he's like,
I
"Who are
think
you?" And then he puts the gun down. Like, what do you mean? Who am I? Boom. Ryland's like, "Nah, man."
I I was like, that has to be the most devastating, like that is the most
Oh,
devastating anything anyone can say to you is like, you've spent 40 years of your life
yeah,
dedicated to finding this guy. You find him and he's like, "Who are you?"
yeah.
You're
I'm
like,
like,
"What?"
listen, I'm over here saying to myself, he's in Gorman clothing. He's really going at me. Like, he might kill me. And I'm sitting there like, I've never even seen this guy in my life. What did I do to you? Like my God. Like, geez, what's going on? And
Well,
then
he
then
did though, and like he kidnapped him on Ferrix, like
he
at that
did.
at the beginning. But it was just kind of like that interaction meant nothing to him,
Right.
which is why he's like, "I don't even remember you."
He would for sure no way remember him. You know what I mean? Like, I don't remember you. Like,
But but to me, that's why it was so interesting and of how complex his character is,
yeah.
because his whole world shattered when he realized that like Dedra was lying to him, the Empire was being secretive, and they were actually like forcing this rebellion so they could kill the people on purpose.
Yeah.
And then he still was against the rebellion and wanted to kill Andor. And so it's kind of like his belief system and his like code structure is so interesting that like he knows even when like the Empire's wrong, he still wants to follow whatever he believes.
Correct. Correct. I wanted to also talk about another kind of like really sad, genuinely, this really made me sad. But it also goes to where I'm going with Luthen. I have it written down here. Um, Vel loses her lover in that whole arc as well in a way that was just kind of a freak accident. And you could really feel the pain because it really just they had that whole conversation where it's like we're more valuable to Luthen like away from each other because I'm like I get it. I'm like, yeah, because Luthen knows that that gives you pause. If you love someone in this whole thing, that gives you pause to potential. Like that also gives you something to be exploited by the Empire. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They can get to you that way. And so for her to pass away, that was kind of like her all in moment. It was sort of like Val saying, okay, like I guess her saying what she said to the kid, which was devastating to him because he genuinely felt horrible that it happened, remorseful. But it was also like her hurt I could feel in that moment of maybe this is what it looks like. Maybe it's like this is what needs to happen kind of thing. Um, Thought that was wild. Back to Cyril for a second. I thought it was incredible that even in that moment, Cyril was able to make Dedra feel some fear, like that moment of just tell me what you need to tell me. Because very few times, and we'll get to Dedra, but very few times in that show do you see her actually kind of afraid, and like
Mm-hmm.
she was afraid because she genuinely felt for him, right? Um, and she was more probably afraid of losing him than anything else. And then the irony being that she does, including Cyril's mother, you know. So, sorry to get somber for a moment. I have it written down. I want to make sure I get it out, you know. Um,
Yeah, yeah. We'll get to that section of episodes here in a second, but Yeah, no, I
We'll
agree.
get to the next one. This was all still in the second
Yeah,
arc.
yeah.
Anything else from the second arc? Just Gorman and just well, I guess it was building in the previous one because Cassian becomes Sky. He goes and he ultimately determines they're
Yeah,
not ready for revolution. That
yeah,
was still
yeah,
in that one. And then the revolution part happens in the third one. So I'm kind of getting my arcs
yeah.
blended here, but it's all relevant. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I thought um, interesting that they mentioned so when they provide the backstory to, I guess you could say, the first Gorman massacre, where so when he goes to the hotel, the bellhop is like explaining that essentially Grand Moff Tarkin
Yep.
landed some I don't remember what type of
One of those
ship
Imperial
he said it
landers, one
was.
of those like
Yeah,
tri ones, just right
yeah, that's
on
right.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he landed one of them in the city square on top of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And that I think was an interesting detail, and it was great because it was kind of foreshadowing and provided some stakes of like, these people don't care, that like you can try and like call their bluff, but they're never bluffing. Like they will do whatever it takes.
Correct. They're not bluffing. Yeah. And the most evil of them are never bluffing, right? Um, I'm skipping around a bit because in that second arc you also get it's not to be lost the whole relationship between Bix and Cassian, um, because it will go someone literally in the last frame of the show it goes a direction. But I gotta say that my biggest issue I had with season two was Cassian's still seemingly lack of commitment to the whole cause. Um, he's kind of in, he's kind of not. He's done a lot. He doesn't want to do any more, and it just kind of seemed like Bix was the reason, obviously. And I obviously they go a direction into which Bix ultimately leaves him, which is another really devastating scene in this show. But I'm also over here saying it needs to happen because he's clearly got a really big role to play in what's going to happen. And I just wish that Cassian would have been more all in throughout this whole season instead of it being at the end of the third arc
I
for that to really
Yeah,
happen.
but
I got annoyed
but
with that.
I will say that that's sort of the point of his arc. Is the whole first season he's like, I'm not a rebel. I'm just a pilot. I don't really want to be a part of this. This isn't my fight.
Sure.
And then as he gets progressively more and more involved, he still doesn't want to be fully committed because he's like, this isn't my thing. Like his whole thing is being able to be independent and
Yeah.
not having to be part of it. Um, and then to the point where eventually I Bix leaves him so that he is like dedicated to it because she's a much bigger supporter of it and fully in than he is. Because if you really think about it, if you like really think, like, it makes sense for Bix because she was tortured by Dedra, and like
Yeah.
she is like fully, I hate these people. I want them all to die. They ruined my life. Like, and so for Andor, that never really happened. I mean,
I agree. It go
like
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 you had the whole Dr. Gorst thing, and then that was kind of
yeah,
put to bed. One of the best seasons is when she put the headset on him and flipped on everything to as highest as it'll go. And
yeah.
I literally was sitting there like, yeah, turn it the highest it'll go, turn it on and leave it on. I was like, I was, and then like she kind of that was kind of her closing that arc of her coming. That was like her squashing her demon ghosts, you know?
Not to nitpick that particular scene
Oh
because it
no.
was great. I just thought it was a little dumb that she broke into the building to torture him to then leave and blow up the building. Like, I
Well,
was like,
yeah, I kind of
just
took
blow
that
up the
as
building.
I kind of
Like,
took that as they blew up a section of the building, and she did that as like in passing. That's kind of how I took that. But I get what you mean. That can easily be interpreted as, well, why did they blow it up if they were just gonna like what? Like they could have just blown it up with him in there.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, but I get what you mean. Um, I'd like to move ahead to some stuff here because some things happened in the last arc that again, I understand why they happened. I don't love that they happened. Okay.
Hmm.
But we do in that last arc get to see, well, okay, back up for a second. I have this written up too. In one of those arcs, one of the arcs you have going on here is a character who actually lives in the end. It's Wilmon from the beginning, and he goes through and he's Cassian's friend. You don't know if he's going to make it. You don't. He kind of is away from Cassian for a bit. He's with Saw Gerrera, and that just incredible episode where Saw kind of plays him against this other engineer and everything. And then, of course, Saw reveals he's been transmitting our stuff to the Empire. I interpreted that as Saw knew that for a while and was trying to train up another engineer without letting the other guy know. And once he knew
Hmm.
Wilmon could do it, he was like, all right, cool. This guy's a traitor. So there we go. I had some people saying that he planted it on purpose. I'm like, nah, Saw wouldn't do that. Like, I think this guy, I think he was training up Wilmon. Um, and then Saw Gerrera delivers, Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera delivers one of my favorite speeches in Star Wars, kind of this season's version, Casen, of the Stars Guard speech in the last one, where he's just like, you think I'm crazy? Yes. Revolution's not for the sane. Look at us, unloved, hunted. We're all going to be dead by the time the new republic is even back, and yet here we are. With Luthen, you're here, you're right here, you're ready to fight. That whole scene's incredible. And then he just takes the mask off and breathes in the Rhino. I was like, dude, this is like, there's a reason why Forrest Whitaker has an Oscar, okay, for Last King of Scotland, okay. This is
Yeah.
incredible. So, just wanted to. That's on my list here. Did you love that as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's always great. It's great to see these Star Wars projects get actors like of Forrest Whitaker's caliber. I mean,
Absolutely.
because even the small-ish role of Saw Gerrera, like
Yeah.
I mean, especially in Rogue One, like for him to have been in Rogue One for just that portion of it, um, was super incredible, and then to see more of the character in Andor, and you could like he was so good at displaying the character and sort of getting the point across that this guy is just a psycho,
Oh, he's nuts.
but he's doing it because he is a psycho. Like he's nuts, but you have to be nuts.
Dude, name me a revolution in history that didn't have some people who are crazy, like in real life. I mean, you look this story up. John Paul Jones was a Scottish man who sailed to the English Isles and basically just pirated them the entirety of the American Revolution simply because he was on the side of the Americans. I mean, this man just pirated them the entire time. It's insane. Like I was like, yeah, that guy's probably not totally all there, but hey, if it's a war, it's a war, right? Um,
Hmm.
so just wanted to give some props to Saw Gerrera though. Last King of Scotland, he won the Oscar. He played Idi Amin, the real life dictator of Uganda. He's terrifying in that movie, by the way, if you've ever
Hmm.
seen it. Horror, like he's very scary. So it's like incredible actor, Forrest Whitaker. Um, Wanted to pull back here. We get to see the history of Luthen and Clea, which is a phenomenal episode. And they're going back and forth between how Luthen found him, how they changed names, or excuse me, how Luthen found her, how they changed names, what their relationship was like, sort of like how she was kind of his daughter, kind of not, but she effectively was his daughter, a daughter of the Revolution, if you will. And it also goes to show how long Luthen's been in this, quite frankly, like years. I'm like, this dude's been at this like 3 decades. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, like he brought her up to know all the tips and tricks and everything, and for her to somberly, take him off the life support, I thought was a very beautiful scene, but also it was kind of one of those it has to be done kind of scenes. Her using every kind of trick in the book to get to him and do that. I thought it was nice, but kind of skipping ahead, I also really loved the scene of when she finally gets to Yavin, I believe is what it's called, and she has that smile in the end where she sees the troops like moving. I thought to myself, this is probably the first time that Clea has seen her or Luthen's labor all of these years. Would you agree? Like
Yeah. There was like a conversation to when Cassian was like, "We're gonna take her to Yavin," and she's like, "Oh, they like." She was like, "Yeah, they don't like Luthen or I very much over there or whatever because they probably because she knew that they were talking bad about Luthen's hiding out on Coruscant or
Right.
not being on the front lines or whatever." But what the backstory really showed is that everything kind of came out of Luthen's like mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it started with Luthen just being, a crazy person acting kind of independently, and then it morphed into him getting more and more support from friends everywhere,
I have
and
friends everywhere.
and it grew, and so it was cool to see as the season sort of progressed, like they get more and more resources, and then they eventually get to Yavin where we see them on in A New Hope, and
And
and so it was kind of cool to see.
which leads to one of the things I was quite upset about, but I understood it more as I thought about it. I didn't like how everyone at the table was just completely mistrusting Cassian's. He goes, risks life and limb. We see the creation of K2, and K2 has a scene stealing incredible moment where he just saves them, takes out an entire Imperial squadron, walks out there. Wait, are you with us? Nope. Knocks him off the edge. um, incredible stuff. We get to see a little bit of him, but I didn't love that Cassian is trying to explain to like the rebellion, like Senate, basically the mini table, the round table, and they're not believing him. And Cassian finally says something that I was like, please say that, and he was like I am not gonna stand here and listen to on this man's deathbed a bunch of people talk about him who have sacrificed a fraction of what he has to even have you guys sitting here. And they got like offended by that. And I'm like, yeah, like can we stop this? Can we stop this whole mistrusting Luthen thing? Like I get the whole mistrust espionage thing, but I am standing here telling you Luthen's dead. He would not have died if this was not massively important. You know what I mean? Um,
I but that
it
in there
annoyed
is the
me.
reason
It annoyed me.
that is the reason that Cassian didn't want to be officially part of the rebellion
Right.
is that like he was like why are you and this is sort of a big common theme across different projects too is it's like everybody has their opinion and wants to be in charge
Yeah.
and to the point where some people that are outsiders like Cassian kind of are like how are you any different than the Empire because it's not like you're really being super open with listening to other ideas either like I'm coming to you with good information and you're not believing it because you
Yeah.
hate the person that gave it to you.
Yeah.
Like,
I have this banging of the table moment of like, oh, is this or is this not a war? Oh, it is. Well, then can you guys just believe me? like, you know, there was another summer moment I loved, and I actually shed a tear. I didn't think I would, but it was really weird. That moment where Cassian tells Wilmon that Luthen died. You know the moment? It's in the very last episode,
mm,
and Wilman kind of looks at him like, because he knows what that means, and then he says to him, "He made it worth it." And then they hugged, and I felt every bit of that because I'm like, these two guys are only standing here and alive because of this, because of that guy. And it's like one of those moments of someone passes away that's close to you, but like no one around you is really feeling the same or didn't know the person, but you're hugging the one person who would. That really got to me. He was like, he made it worth it. And I was like, dude, that hit me hard because it took me back to the first season, you know? Um,
mm.
but regardless, a lot of nice little. I like that the season doesn't really end on like a bang, so to speak. The bang is Road One, really, in the whole first
Yeah.
original trilogy.
I
But
it
yeah,
was really nice, sort of like the end montage with the music playing, and then like as Cassian's walking to his ship, like everybody's getting into places for Rogue One,
yep,
like they're and then so like the end of the final episode, then you kick off right into Rogue One, and then you kick off right into New Hope, like it's all straight together, like with the same week.
it's awesome. And I got to say, I have this written down. Cassian's walk at the end of that episode was everything to me. He's got the jacket on. He literally looks like, man, the arc this dude has gone on. Like he looks like a rebel leader now. Like walking out to his ship. No one's questioning where he's going. You know, no one's doing any of this stuff anymore. My man's walking out here. They're playing the theme in the background. They're showing where every character is, and we'll get to that. But I wrote this down. Cassian walking to that cruiser, to that pilot seat at the end of the show was how I feel walking into the office every day, man. You walk in like in the sense of you feel like you're right where you belong. You feel like you shouldn't be in any other place professionally or cause wise in your life. Since I kind of flipped back into sports, I have felt that way every time I go to work, man. I wrote that down and I watched that scene like 3 times, but that's just me. That's the boat of incredible confidence I got watching that scene back a few times.
Yeah, yeah,
Just amazing.
absolutely. I
He
mean,
he nods to the Force healer who knows he's got a bigger role. He nods. He's like, "Cool." We see Dedra in prison. That was eye opening.
not just any prison. She is on essentially the same prison. Like
The
it
prison,
probably. I don't know if it's supposed to be the same facility or a different one or the same thing. I don't know, but
the labor camps where they're just building the
yeah,
Death Star. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that was her downfall was quite something. I thought it was a little sudden, if I'm being honest, but from her to the commander, the older guy who pulls out the pistol at the end.
Part of
Um,
guys.
yeah, I thought, it's very, very ominous that it's either succeed in this empire or that happens to you.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
exactly. And so
Yeah,
to me, I thought Dedra's storyline was so interesting
very
because
much.
at the start of season one, she's this power hungry, like super motivated to just climb up the ladder ISP agent, and at the end of season two, like somebody else hacks her stuff and gets information, and they are just like, well, this whole thing, went to hell. We can't trust you, so we're cutting you off. You go to prison, like, and so to see
It
her
was so
so focused
quick.
and so motivated on just climbing the ladder as an ISB officer, to then just being tossed away like trash the second you're not useful anymore.
Yeah,
Very, very poignant of a message.
very much so. And I'll say another thing too. This
The only
this
question I had was I
yeah,
didn't quite understand what exactly they were blaming Partagaz for, because like for them to like basically put him in a position to where he had to shoot himself because he was like going to be punished in some other way. I don't know what he did that was necessarily.
failure. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't.
Like
I mean,
failure in his position to not succeed. I mean, just the unknown, especially when you're an older guy like him, of what's going to
yeah,
happen to you is just very, very scary. Because if you look, like him and the group kind of failed multiple times throughout the season, whether it was Mon Mothma's speech, where
mhm.
she took it a direction I didn't even think she was going to say, the monster we've all let go, Emperor Palpatine. I'm like, oh no, you can't say that. I was literally like, oh no, I didn't know we were saying that. Oh snap.
Yeah,
Um,
as a side note, I don't know if you know this,
mhm.
but that speech has existed for years in the Star Wars universe.
Do tell.
So there was an episode of Star Wars Rebels where where the characters of Rebels have to basically help her escape Coruscant too.
Cool.
And so there's a theory. I don't know if it got kind of retconned because it was Cassian that did it, but theoretically, like somewhere between Coruscant and Yavin, there was the ghost that the crew of the rebels that helped her get out of there too. I'm not really sure how that comes into play, but there's a storyline to where Mon Mothma gave a speech about the Gorman massacre, and they have to help her flee Coruscant.
I think it works if you think it. Cass took her to Cass got her out of there. Cass got her into said ship to get her got her to the
Yeah,
safe house. They don't show how she got to Yavin. So I'm like, oh well,
they
somehow,
did.
some
They
way
don't. Yeah,
they handed her off to the rebels.
they
And
they probably
yeah,
intentionally kind of left that open ended to leave
correct.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Like, and I just
But
love that line where she's like, I have no idea how to thank you. And Cass is like, make it worth it, you know?
yeah, And I think I will say that it's a good point to say it. Probably the three like best episode run of anything that I've seen in a long time
Mhm.
is the main Gorman Massacre episode, Who Are You? To that episode, the Welcome to the Rebellion, her escaping Coruscant,
Yeah,
and then to the Luthen death episode. Like that three episode run across the two kind of storylines is incredible content. I
I
mean, the
agree.
best stuff I've seen in a long time.
I agree. It's very good. Even with the year in the middle, it still works.
Yeah.
You know, that is fantastic. I agree. The last bit we see is that Bix was pregnant, which was a scene. I wondered if she went back to the wheat fields. I like that they showed the little red droid ultimately got a friend. I felt bad for that guy. Um,
Mhm.
but for Cass to have I in that moment, I thought to myself, I do agree that Bix left for the reasons she said. Bix probably knew she was pregnant and was like, I have to leave
I
because he's absolutely going to pull out of this whole thing if he knows he's a dad.
I want to say that Tony Gilroy confirmed that that's why she left
Yeah, it has to
when
be.
she did,
Yeah,
and that she found out she was pregnant. She knew Cass would stop and quit
yeah,
if he knew, and so she left so that he would never do that.
yeah. And it's both like beautiful and heartbreaking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Just because we know what happens to Cass. But this ultimately, I've said everything I want to say, and I've gone through it, man. This was so good, and it's very kind of unfortunate that we probably there's no real conducive way to get more of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could think of would be to sort of use a lot of the same creative team to just write more like rebellion stories.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind it.
I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see if the magic can be replicated. But I think that generally the the formula I think is possible to be replicated because like I think like I've said I it's nice to see just something different. I
I
mean
agree.
I don't I think we talked about it when it was announced, but like the the Ryan Gosling project that the Sean Levy Ryan Gosling project that was
Yes.
announced, like I don't know. I mean, worth a shot. I don't know if it'll be good, but it's something different. Probably not going to be, space wizardy. I mean, it should be pretty grounded as far as just following some, pilot guy. I mean, it should be relatively like out there as far as like normal for Star Wars, which is maybe an avenue to kind of explore of people the benefit you have with Star Wars is the world has already been built.
Yeah.
So all you need to do is just expand and you can focus on telling individual stories within a universe that already exists.
Very
Like
true.
people know like you give some context of you just say, "Oh, the Empire." People know the time frame you're talking about. They know that this is the time. And if you have, like there's a way to tell just individual stories and just kind of go deeper with the world building. I've been saying like the best part of Andor as a show was when they kept cutting to Luthen and Mon Mothma and Coruscant. Give me a Coruscant only show and just kind
Yeah.
of focus it on Coruscant. I would love to see a show about like normal people that have like that like work normal jobs that somehow get roped into something and
Yeah.
like the people who are like have no idea what's going on. They're
Or
just
all they
living
know is
life.
or all they know is like imperial propaganda, right? Stuff like that.
Well, so speaking of that too, there was all the talk about the propaganda, but then in the whole plot line where Bix, when she's like super depressed and in the safe house,
Yeah.
and she's like watching like daytime brain dead TV,
Yeah, she is.
like
Yep.
that's what the people in Coruscant are watching,
Yeah.
and so it'd be super interesting to see a project focused on like a character or some characters from, a place like Coruscant, to where there is sort of a theme of the above ground Coruscant, to
Yeah.
where all the highfalutin people have this I don't really care personality or opinion because nothing matters to them. Like nothing affects them. Because like
But then the lower you go on the
yeah,
planet,
yeah.
it well, that's why I really hope I'm looking forward to them remaking Knights of the Old Republic because there's a lot of really interesting Coruscant stuff they do in that game.
Yeah, exactly.
That I think a lot of people in this generation, I hope they follow through with that, knock on wood. Plenty of things not happening in the video game space these days that you wish were. I'm looking at you, EA, with your Black Panther not going to happen game. But I digress. I think that, again, like we just said, the setting would be really cool. I guess, Casen, I'll kind of close out the conversation by saying it's getting a little long now. What would be? I once sat here on the show and said that if you and I were to write our own Star Wars story, like in terms of whether it was a Jedi story, whether it was a smuggler story, whether it was a Mandalorian type story, a political drama, something like that. Would it be safe to say that you would really want it to be sort of like the Mon Mothma sections of Andor? Like that would be you'd want
Yeah,
to write.
yeah,
We'll
yeah.
start
I,
there
I
with
mean,
writing.
the concept of a senator spending her days, sort of I keeping the peace in the Senate, and then her nights in secretly working to fund the rebellion, and like watching how that like slowly just explodes her life
Yeah.
is was super interesting, and like that is the type of stuff that is worth seeing of how this rebellion and the empire, the toll that it takes on individual people.
You almost you almost could have done a show called Mon, where it was just Mon Mothma stuff. You almost could have done it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, just because I feel like they showed what they could there, but there's so much more they could show with Mon Mothma.
Which on the topic of Mon Mothma, Genevieve Riley, absolutely incredible like storyline with her career, because she is now like Mon Mothma for life because of a deleted scene from Revenge of the Sith that never was even in the movie.
Really?
She was cast as a very young Mon Mothma in episode 3, and there was a scene to where she was talking to Padme and Organa, and they were having some conversation about like it was like around the same time that Palpatine filed for emergency powers, and they were kind of giving the rumblings of a rebellion,
Yeah.
and she was in that scene, and it was kind of a boring talking
Rumblings
exposition
of an
scene.
empire, you mean?
Well, rumblings of rebelling against the empire. They were
Got it.
saying
Got it.
something has to be done, like he's getting too much power
Yep.
and all this stuff, and so it was cut because it was kind of a boring scene, but because of that, they brought her back for Rogue One, and because she
So
was in Rogue One, she was in Andor. So
so wow. So
super
really, like if you would have seen that scene, she would have been a really young like Mon Mothma, and it would have made sense with like where she's at age wise.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I like that a lot. Genevieve O'Reilly, I guess is what her name is.
Riley, yeah,
Apparently during the dance sequence in the first arc, she was like 3 drinks in or something. Um,
probably.
like at a like at a wedding, and they just like edited a lot of her own dance moves like around her, which that was a really creative piece of world building too. Just it's not a wedding DJ, it's just a floating droid that
Now, Now, to
yeah.
me, I will say, I thought it was super cool to see like this one planet's customs and their wedding rituals, and like it's super interesting to just sort of see them expand on like how this planet operates, and I think that's cool. I think it's cool,
Oh, it's
and
very cool.
the,
They're all a bunch of weirdos, but yeah, that's
the,
cool.
I actually just saw a TikTok about like about how funny it is that like Mon Mothma's this like essentially this resistance lib, and out of spite for her mother, her daughter becomes this ultra conservative that's like obsessed with the old
Yeah.
ways, and like as part of the ritual is her to like cut the braid, is for her husband to cut the braid, and
Right.
like as he's doing it, she looks over at her. It's so funny.
Yeah, the last little bit I can kind of compare it to is that Casen, have you ever played the game Far Cry 4?
No, no.
Have you
Mm-mm.
played any of the Far Cry games?
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I
Well,
have.
well, bottom line, Far Cry 4 revolves around two revolutionaries that you're trying to defeat this dictator and bring the country in a certain direction. And the irony of the situation is that regardless of which revolutionary you side with in winning the country for and overthrowing the dictator, it either goes back to super conservative old custom ways that are by far and large not accepted by today's standards of like first world, or it or the other revolutionary like triples down on the some of the stuff that the dictator's doing, doesn't become a dictator, but like says, listen, we need to keep doing the stuff we're doing that's borderline illegal to fund our country. Okay. So it's like gray area both sides. It's like, oh, okay, so things just kind of get bad no matter what. Just which is why I like the ending of Far Cry 6, where they leave the ending a little bit more ambiguous, which is also about overthrowing a dictator Giancarlo Esposito in that game. Um, so anyway, I was just it made me think of the Mon Mothma arc in that first arc of just like she's between the two.
Hmm.
Not between the two revolutionaries, but she wants to break from it, and yet it's almost like because she didn't break from it years ago, she's now kind of suffered to continue the source. Last thing I'll say
Yeah.
on her is it's very interesting that they show her husband now with I think the other guy's wife, the friend of hers wife or someone, he's with someone else at the end of the
I
show.
I
And it makes
I
and it makes me wonder if
I interpreted that as just some random woman of the night
yeah,
that he acquired for
yeah.
a few hours.
And so that happened, and I think that there's something to be said for it makes you wonder what he even knows what happened to Mon Mothma. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it shows he doesn't maybe care.
He doesn't
I don't.
either care or like if he does care, maybe he wonders, but it's also sort of like, okay, I'm finally rid of her kind of thing.
Mhm.
I don't know. It goes to show I appreciate that it shows me where every character is at the end of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was great at like kind of wrapping up everything. I thought it was going back to the wedding thing.
Sure.
It was very important of a storyline that in order to like get the money that she needed to like hide whatever like rebellious activity she was doing, she had to essentially sell her daughter to this
Yeah.
mobster guy. And I thought that was great at just sort of showing the sacrifices that everybody was making.
Everyone
That
sacrifices a lot.
that it wasn't just Andor risking his life. I mean, it's these people like Mon Mothma and Luthen were actually sacrificing other tangible things in their life.
Correct, for sure. Pulling it all the way back to what we said about sacrifice, right? So ultimately, out of 10, what would you give Andor as a show? I really would be curious to know if it's even rateable. We also don't have to rate it
Yeah,
unless you
I
want to.
mean,
It's
I
such a
would
uniquely
definitely
weird show, so
I would definitely have to say, I don't know, a 9.5 out of 10. I mean,
I'd give it a 9 to a nine and a
it's
half as well. It's not perfect.
it's definitely on the curve of like the bar was so low that it just blew your expectations out of the
I
water.
agree. I agree. I think in a series where I think there's more genuinely not good Star Wars content than there is good, it to say that it's a good show does not do the show justice. It's a fantastic piece of like drama entertainment that I think most people that like this kind of storytelling would like. Um, it would also be fascinating if this was your introduction into Star Wars, like you watched
Mhm.
Andor in the first place, and then you go maybe to Rogue One and then into the original trilogy. I just feel like tonally that would be a really wild way to be introduced to this saga.
So right after I finished the season two, I went back and rewatched Rogue One, and then right after Rogue One, I went back and watched New Hope. And Yes, it's very interesting
Yeah,
because
tonally, it's just
it's just tonally like A New Hope doesn't really fit with those two projects.
no, it doesn't.
Rogue One fits with Andor, like it does, and so it's just kind of weird to shift from like
Yeah,
like
goes
this
from
dark adult sort of thing to space wizards adventure.
goes from Darth Vader just lighting a whole hallway on fire to you're part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Whoa, wait a minute. Come
Yeah,
on, you don't
yeah.
know that about me. I'm just a princess. What do you mean? I didn't just see you waste like everyone in in that ship earlier.
Yeah, it's just that scene where just the lightsaber lights up the
Oh,
hallway, and then it's
amazing.
just let us out, let us out.
Yeah, it was just like it goes from hey, let us out to hey, take this.
Yeah.
We ain't making it out of this. Here, you take this. There's so much tension in that scene too. That's one of my favorite Star Wars scenes because
Oh,
just
it is. That is
all he's
great.
got
That
to
is
do is
great.
flip the lightsaber on, and I'm like, and I always know, and not to make this a thing of Rogue One, but like the fact that Vader is so scary that they don't need to show him doing anything. I thought Vader was scary simply in that scene in Rogue One with Krennic, direct Krennic, and Krennic's like, so I'm still in charge, and then all of a sudden he can't breathe, and it's like, oh, here we go. Vader's intimidating enough to talk to, when even when you're like that level of the Empire. Um, because how scary him and Emperor Palpatine are, just with how powerful they are. But then you see actually what he's capable of just to a bunch of troopers. I'm like, oh my god, like yeah, oh, it's terrifying. So, um, in that same vein, Casen, to kind of close things out here, he has an incredible moment in the first Jedi Star Wars in the Jedi Fallen Order game. Um,
Hmm.
where like the one former apprentice is talking, and then all of a sudden she just freezes up, seizes up, and you just hear the breathing. And I'm like, see, his aura is that all he has to do is be heard. You don't even have to see him. Like you hear him, and it's like, oh god,
Yeah, yeah.
this just got as bad as it could. So
Yes, yes.
anyway, yeah, Obi-Wan still cracked his mask open in Obi-Wan, which is still a good show. I'll die on that hill. Anyway, that's what we got, y'all. Um, Thank you everyone so much for listening, watching, however you consume the show. Let us know your thoughts on Andor yourself. I think a lot of people are coming around to this show. It also just may not be your cup of tea, depending on your type of Star Wars, but that's kind of how the series is. Not everything is for everybody. So, any final thoughts, Kason?
No, I mean, yeah, if you're into like spy political stuff, even if you're not into Star Wars, give it a shot because I mean, it definitely works if you remove it from Star Wars and put it into any other setting.
And if for some reason you listen to this whole thing where we spoiled a lot of stuff, I still think there's a lot of stuff you could get out of it because this is a show that's very important in context. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot from season one we didn't really touch on, and
no,
it's worth seeing, even if you did get it spoiled, because it's the moments and the visuals are very, very captivating for sure.
and quite frankly, there's parts of this show I'll go back to just because they're very very good.
Yeah,
On that note, this is Kellen,
this is Kason.
and we will see you as always at the next stop.